Good morning everybody, it's great to join with you again this morning, and I'm going to hand this section over to Kieron today. She's got a great activity for you where you're going to need some paper and some colouring in things, and if possible some kind of glue. Don't worry, it's not too messy. And she's going to tell you the story as well about our next person in our Faithful Hall of Fame, and you can find out all about him in the book of Judges, Judges chapter 6 in the Old Testament. So I shall hand over, get your Rice Krispies, get your drink, and just see how God speaks to you through this story. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hello everybody. The next person in our Faith Hall of Fame is Gideon. Unfortunately, this story begins with God not being very happy with his people, the Israelites. If you remember, the Israelites were the ones God saved from Pharaoh. The people Moses led across the Red Sea on dry ground. Hundreds of years have passed since then, but throughout all of God's miracles that they'd experienced, the Israelites were letting God down. There were consequences for these actions. God didn't bless them, but gave them into the hands of the Midianites. The Midianites certainly weren't friends with the Israelites. The Midianites took or ruined all the Israelites' crops and animals. The Israelites had to hide from them in caves. After Israel had nothing left, they finally cried out to God to help. God, like he always does, heard their cry. And, like he always does, God had a plan. The cool thing about this is that although God wasn't happy with the Israelites, he still listened to them and he still answered their prayer. Now this is where Gideon comes into the story. He was threshing wheat in a hidden place so that the Midianites wouldn't see him, because otherwise they'd have stolen his wheat. And an angel of the Lord came and sat next to Gideon. The angel spoke to him and said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "But sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, if that's true, why is all this bad stuff happening? Where are all the miracles our fathers, the people that crossed the Red Sea, told us about?" The Lord replied to Gideon, "Go with all your strength and save Israel from the Midianites. I'm sending you to do it." Then Gideon started the excuses. "But Lord, how can I save Israel? My people are the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the smallest and the youngest in my family." Now, have you ever thought that? I can't do it. I'm too young. I'm too small. The people around me aren't powerful enough. But God said, "I will be with you, and you will defeat all the Midianites together." Gideon still wasn't sure, so he asked God for a sign. What he did is he put an offering on an altar. That's the way they gave gifts and asked for forgiveness to God before Jesus died on the cross. So Gideon set his offering, meat and unleavened bread, down on a rock. The fire came from the rock and it completely consumed the meat and the bread. The angel disappeared, but Gideon realised that it was the angel of the Lord. That night, the Lord told Gideon to take down his altar because it was the altar that Gideon's father had built for Baal, who was a pretend god, and also to cut down the Asherah pole because that also was made for another god that people wanted to worship. The Israelites had started believing in these fake gods. That's why God was angry with them, because of course, as we all know, he's the only real and true God, and these people were praying and giving offerings to pieces of wood and statues that can't hear or see or do anything. So Gideon took 10 of his servants at night, because he was afraid of getting caught from the people in the town, and tore down the altars. The people were mad when they realised Gideon had wrecked their altars. But they decided that if Baal was really a god, he could punish Gideon. Of course, nothing happened to Gideon because Baal isn't real. Gideon still wanted to make sure that God would save the Israelites, so he asked for another sign. He placed a piece of wool from a sheep on the ground. He said, in the morning when the dew comes, you know, the wet stuff you get on the grass, if there's dew only on the fleece, but the ground around it is dry, then I know God will save us. Now in the morning, Gideon checked the wool. The fleece was soaking wet, but the ground was dry. Still, he needed another sign. This time he asked for the opposite to happen, the fleece to be dry and the ground to be wet. Sure enough, the next morning it was just as he asked. So Gideon gathered up an army and started out for the Midianite camp. He was probably feeling pretty confident because he had lots of men and God had said he'd help him. But God doesn't always do things the way we want or expect. God had a different plan. He told Gideon that he had too many men in his army because he knew that Israel would think that they defeated the Midianites on their own without God's help. So God said to Gideon, tell the people who are afraid to go home. 22,000 people left. That's a lot of people. More than half of the whole army went home. 10,000 stayed. Gideon still felt pretty good. At least he had 10,000 men, right? Not for long. The Lord told Gideon he still had too many men. They went down to the water for a drink, and the Lord said to Gideon, separate the men that drink the water like a dog, lapping it up, and those that get down on their knees and drink from their hands. God told Gideon that he only wanted the men who cut their hands and drank the water from them. There was only 300 of them. That way, when Israel won, they would know that God was in control because they only had 300 men fighting. Gideon didn't know how God was going to help him win. There were so many Midianites against just 300 of them, so he was worried. He didn't get much sleep. So God decided to help Gideon feel better. During the night, the Lord spoke to Gideon. If you're still afraid that I'm going to help you win, go down into the valley with your servant Purah, where the Midianites are staying, and listen to what they're saying. You'll feel much better then. He was still afraid, but he took Purah and snuck down to the Midianite camp. Just as Gideon and Purah arrived, they heard one of the Midianites talking to his friend about a dream he'd had. He was saying, I dreamt that a round loaf of bread came rolling into our camp. It came so fast that it ran into one of our tents and made it fall over. His friend responded, this must mean the sword of Gideon, and that God will help him defeat the Midianites. As soon as Gideon heard this, he worshipped God. He ran back to camp and called to his people, get up, the Lord has given us the Midianite camp. He divided all the Israelites into 3 groups, gave them trumpets. When Gideon started to blow his trumpet, the rest of his men followed. They blew their trumpets and they yelled, for the Lord and for Gideon. Then they broke the jars they were carrying. So they held their torches in one hand, the trumpet in the other, and shouted, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. When the Midianites heard this, they started yelling and running around. When all the trumpets started again, the Lord caused the Midianites to start going crazy. They started to turn on each other with their swords. The rest that got away were captured. That was the day God saved Midian and defeated the Midianites. Without God, none of this was possible. I hope Gideon learned his lesson and stopped worrying. With God, nothing is impossible. Next time you're in a tough situation, know that God can give you strength and he wants to help you. No matter how young, no matter how small you are. Just ask and he will. Amen. Okay, we're going to make a trumpet now to remind us of when Gideon went into battle with God against the Midianites, and they blew their trumpets and they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." For your trumpet, all you need is 2 pieces of paper, printer paper, and they can have writing on the back, that doesn't matter. You need a felt tip, some glue or tape, and then preferably a pair of scissors. So you might want to pause it and get those now. Okay, so you take your first piece of paper. If it's got writing on, put that face up and then that will be hidden. Get your felt tip, put it in one corner, just diagonally across the corner of your page, and then roll it. So you're rolling around your felt tip. Hopefully you can see that on my white table. And you're making a nice thin tube. Take the felt tip out of that and then tape up your tube or glue it. That could go to one side, and then your next piece of paper needs to be folded in half, so corner to corner, that way round. Okay? And then you can tear along the fold, or if you've got scissors, open it up and just cut along that fold. That will give you 2 pieces of paper. The first one you're going to use for your handle. So it's going to start the same way. Get that felt tip, put it across one of the corners and then roll across to the other side. It will make a similar tube, it will just be much shorter because you've only got half the paper. Don't roll it too tight, then your felt tip will be able to slip out, and you're going to tape that, but this time you're going to squash it flat. So put it on your table and then all the way along, just flatten it down with your fingers so it looks something like that. Okay, then you're going to fold each end roughly to the middle or a little bit less. So I think my middle's about there. So I'm going to fold that one just to about there. And then fold the other one similarly like that. And then if you open them up, it'll look something like that. Okay? And then what you can do is if you fold back the opposite way, each end, like that, it makes it easier to stick on to make the handle of your trumpet. Okay, so you should have something that looks a little bit like that, which will be a handle pretty soon, hopefully. Okay, then you've got your last piece of paper, and from that you're going to make a cone shape. Now this is the bit I found the trickiest. So if you put your finger diagonally near one end, one of the long ends like that, and then you're going to roll from the other corner at the bottom, you're going to sort of roll it round your finger like this to make a sort of cone. So what it needs to be is nice and wide at the top and nice and narrow at the bottom. Okay, so if you wind it round, a sort of cone shape may appear. Okay, what you can do is you can adjust it by twisting it round to make it, and put your fingers in the top until you've got a sort of cone shape. Okay, it doesn't have to be by any means perfect, and then you're going to tape that in place too. Okay, so you've now got 3 bits for your trumpet. So you get your first long tube and you're going to stick on your handle, okay, and you're going to put the cone on the top. So if you put the cone on, slot your tube in the top, stick that down like that, and then at the bottom half you're going to just put some tape to stick on that handle. Okay, so it goes on a bit like that. Okay, so you're going to need to put your tape So if you've got your folds like that, look, and you see that. Okay, so you put a bit of tape on that end to hold that securely in place, and then across the other end like that. Make sure it sticks up nice and high for you to hold on that flap. So you've got like a right angle corner there. Stick that on there like that, and then you've got your blower thing on the end. And then just to finish it off, if you get your felt tip, you can draw some air holes with your felt tip. I'm going to draw 3. I'm not colouring them in very well. You can do it a lot better than I have. So it looks a bit like that. Okay, so there now is your finished trumpet. And you can, of course, then be blowing your trumpet and shouting a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. If you have a plastic straw, you can cut it to a point. If you put it in that end and seal it shut, you can then do a really cool sound blowing down it, a bit more like a trumpet sound, but unfortunately I haven't got plastic straw. So anyway, that is my trumpet. So good luck with that, and have fun playing it. Bye bye.